And there we're looking at one of the favoured teams for the series, the lead driver, Australian International Vern Schuppan. Second last year at the 24-hour race of Le Mans, the most experienced driver in the field. An accomplished driver in his earlier years in Formula Ford, where he won a South American series, but a very valued driver in international long-distance sports car racing. He's been in Formula 1 racing. He's been highly prominent in America and earlier in Europe in this type of racing for Formula 5000 racing cars. Had a wretched weekend last weekend at Sandown, where he blew an engine in practices, and then whilst struggling to stay with the leaders with a brand new engine which wasn't delivering full power, blew yet another motor. The Ansett team Elfins have now changed to different types of pistons, the components that failed last weekend, and they're hopeful that everything's under control for the race today. And Vern Schuppan will be starting from the second row of the grid, car number 11, with a best practice time of 50.2. The man that they're all chasing today and in the series so far is Warwick Brown. Returning after a second major crash last year, he hasn't driven since last July until he drove last weekend at Sandown, and at Sandown he withstood challenges from various drivers. He started from pole position, but then withstood a very strong challenge. Initially he was keeping fairly close company with Schuppan, but he started to fall back and then finally had an engine failure on the 5th lap. But then he had very strong challenges from New Zealander Graham McRae. He withstood that. He was looking quite set with a lead of up to about 11 seconds at one stage mid-race to have an easy run to the flag, but then was pegged back in increasingly more slippery conditions with light falling rain by Alfredo Costanzo, the man that's starting now from the left-hand side of him on the front row in the centre of a 3-car front row. Costanzo finally, about 4 laps from the end, slipped past Warwick Brown, and again he looked to have the race won with only 3 laps to go as he was in a commanding lead and pulling away from Brown, and Brown thought that he'd had to give best to Costanzo. But then 2.5 laps from victory and from $8,000, Costanzo blew an engine and probably cost him a couple of $1,000 in components, a lost $8,000 in prize money, another $1,000 in bonus money. Costanzo's got everything rebuilt, and in excellent running yesterday established a best time of 50.2 seconds. Warwick Brown's best was 49.8 as they start to move away now for their warm-up laps. Warwick Brown 49.8 is on pole, 3/10 outside the lap record held by Australian international Alan Jones. Then there were 3 cars on 50.2. Alf Costanzo in number 84. We've seen Bruce Allison now wheel up. There he is in the blue car on the right side. A frantic amount of activity in the Allison pit in the last moment has seen the car readied, and Allison climb in and bring it up onto the front row. So he starts from the outside of the front row in car 62. To his enormous disappointment, he wasn't able to start last weekend. The car gave electrical problem on one of the warm-up laps, and he was a withdrawal. He was burnt in practices, first and second degree burns to his buttocks and to the heels of his feet. But the right heel is still a little bit burnt and causing him some pain, and he in fact is using, or had planned to use if necessary, pain-killing injections for the burns to his right heel. They're just now tightening up the left rear wheel, which loosened itself in practices this morning, and that is 1 minute to go. 1 minute before flag fall, the second row of the grid sees Australian international Vern Schuppan in 11, sharing that row with South Australian Johnny Walker in number 25. Third row, John McCormack absent from a 3-car position, so it's just Graham McRae in 22 and Don Breeden back in 5. Behind is Chris Milton in 10, and in 24, John Davison from Victoria. Then we see Gary Cooper in 12. That's the official starter, half a minute to go. Gary Cooper is next, sharing his row of the grid with a fellow American or teammate of Breeden back. That's John David Breeds, number 4. Behind him, Alan Hamilton in 19, and John Goss in the blue car, number 2. Then we see Keith Holland in the white car, 6. 26 sees John Briggs, the Australian. They're about to get underway. This is the official starter, Glenn Dix. Flag raised, down it goes, and an excellent start from Warwick Brown and from Bruce Allison. Poor old Costanzo left with wheels spinning. They blast away a man we should be watching at the tail end is Kevin Bartlett in number 3. He's had to start from the rear of the grid, not having established any official practice times yesterday. But there it is, Warwick Brown and Johnny Walker, who got the good jump from the second row of the grid and really closes under brakes as they go into the right-hander at about 4th gear, come back down then to 3rd, but he really is glued to his tail. There's Allison in 3rd place, and it's Schuppan in 4th, Costanzo in 5th, but my goodness, an astounding start there for Johnny Walker. Kevin Bartlett up there, I think, in about 6th or 7th position. It certainly is. What an astounding start for Kevin Bartlett as we watch Warwick Brown come round the bowl for the first time, hounded by Johnny Walker. To get back then to Costanzo, Milton, Kevin Bartlett, John Davis and Don Breitenbach. And what a miraculous start for Kevin Bartlett. A brilliant run, John Price, away from the start line from the tail end of the grid for Kevin Bartlett. Look how well Johnny Walker's going with the benefit of a new engine this week, an engine from the Belgian VDS team, the car and the team that he's hounding up there in front of him.
There was one thing we didn't notice, but Costanzo had great difficulty getting off the line. It's quite an art to get off the line, and he got his back wheel spinning too fast and too much smoke coming off, and he was virtually left for dead, and this is what let Walker right through and left Costanzo back in 5th place from the front row of the grid. So however, he's well into it now.
Brown and Walker, then Allison and Schuppan, then Costanzo breaking away from Milton. But Johnny Walker really has the bit between his teeth. A South Australian desperately keen to go well in front of his home crowd. Warwick Brown, without doubt, the pace setter of the series so far with a victory at Sandown. Superb prepared car, beautifully driven by Warwick. Not an engine failure yesterday, but engine problems where they had falling oil pressure and they changed an engine overnight. Through this reverse camber left-hander and then back onto the sweeping bowl, coming round now to complete their 3rd lap. And Warwick Brown. That is Keith Holland in number 6. He's going in very tight there. A little bit offline. That's the leading pair. Then Schuppan, Allison coming into picture, followed by Schuppan. So there's not much separating the first 4. The next one we see looming into picture there was Costanzo in 84. Again, we look at Warwick Brown. Back to America later in the year for the Can-Am Series. 27 years old, to be married in early March, and breaking away slightly, as you can see, from the hard-charging Johnny Walker. But the interest also centres around what Allison and Schuppan can do behind, because they mustn't let Brown get too far away.
Allison is in 3rd and Schuppan in 4th, all about equal distance behind John Walker.
3.5 seconds separating the first 4 cars at this stage. Not a great deal in it. Costanzo last week pegged Brown back from a deficit of about 11 seconds, finally to be able to overtake him in the closing part of last week's race. But Brown at the moment very much setting the pace. He set the pace all through practices, going right back to Friday, when he did 49.8 in practices on Friday, repeated it again on Saturday to grab pole position. Couldn't come out in the second practice session, so he didn't do a great deal of practicing. That's Johnny Walker, then Bruce Allison 3rd, Schuppan in 4th, then we see Costanzo in 5th. We look then to Chris Milton heading that pack in 6th with Kevin Bartlett just behind him. It was Keith Holland in the white car, and that's Alan Hamilton, the Victorian in the silver, ex-VDS team Lola from last year's series. That's a tremendous...
Keith Holland is still smoking.
Yes, Keith Holland has been having a fair amount of trouble through this series, and behind Warwick Brown, doing it fairly easily at the moment out there in front, the way, quite frankly, he'd like to be doing it. Behind him is White Allen, and that's Keith Holland in 6th, the Chevron from England. Not a highly successful team in the series so far, because his teammate Chris Featherstone has been almost the slowest car in at Sandown, and he was the slowest here today in practices. That's Brown coming onto the speed bowl. Johnny Walker's lost nothing to him in the last couple of laps. Allison's breaking away and starting to come up to join them. And Schuppan's not giving much away either, and so too is Alfredo Costanzo, pegging himself to the back of that group of 4 cars. We'll see Costanzo come into picture there, and behind them there is a tremendous strap-on. Now this is the situation that Warwick Brown's going to be faced with throughout the race, lapping other cars. Keith Holland, incidentally, coming into the pits now to retire car number 6, with a lot of smoke coming from it. So that's the first withdrawal. Keith Holland, the Englishman, 31 years old, looks to have his race run with, if not major mechanical problems, certainly an oil leak.
They're not taking much notice of the car, so presumably it's fairly serious.
This is Johnny Walker. A great start as he leapt away there, losing very, very little, in fact nothing on the last 3 laps to the leader. And in the meantime, behind them, we've seen Schuppen pick up ground there on Bruce Allison coming into picture. Schuppen starting to hover around, and then there's Costanzo and Bartlett coming up to join them. Bartlett broken away from the group behind them. And Kevin Bartlett with a rebuilt engine with a few borrowed bits, but basically rebuilding his own engine overnight, starting from the tail end of the grid as he hadn't practiced the car all day yesterday, has already performed miracles to be placed up in 6th position at this stage.
Bartlett's car is the only Brabham in the field, incidentally, and it's a very distinctive looking machine.
So Johnny Walker is gapped now 2.27 seconds. He is behind the leader, Warwick Brown, and further back, while they're already in dense race traffic with 8 laps completed by the leading cars. The job of Brown is to thread his way successfully through the very dense traffic that they're going to encounter all through the race, but also for everybody behind them to make sure that they stay tagged with him. The difficulty is that around the back part of the circuit, there are virtually no spots for overtaking. The only real opportunity for overtaking, Warwick Brown was saying yesterday that even in this section, a slower competitor in terms of lap times can hold him back if he's got a good engine charging onto the speed bowl there. So this is Brown with a 2.25 second lead over Johnny Walker. Allison would be 3 seconds further back with Schuppen right on his tail. Costanzo coming up to join them. He's working on the problem and without any doubt has made ground. Next placed car, Kevin Bartlett, being followed by John Davison, Don Breidenbach, Chris Milton, Graham McRae, Gary Cooper, and John Goss.
Since the placings came up on the screen for the 5th lap, Bartlett has passed Chris Milton.
Bartlett's doing a good job and now has a bit of free track between himself and Costanzo. And again, Brown coming down low on the track and then sweeps to the outside, right out towards the wall. He accelerates hard in 3rd gear, up into 4th gear, and then finally 5th gear, 280 kilometres an hour. That was Allison and Schuppen. Then we saw Costanzo, and waiting for the next pack of cars, and here they come snarling their way onto the banked section of the raceway. It's Kevin Bartlett leading that pack, followed by John Davison, Don Breidenbach, then Graham McRae, Chris Milton, Gary Cooper, John Goss, and the American John David Briggs. And then Alan Hamilton is the next place car in number 19. They have now completed 10 laps, 1/5 of the 50-lap race distance. Back section of the circuit, and this clump of traffic, John Price,
yes,
which is some great formation driving, but a remarkable performance from Kevin Bartlett in particular.
Yes, Bartlett leading that little group, and they're all very close together, bunched, and I think Bartlett is trying to get away from them, because it's very much easier if you're driving on your own. Here he is leading that bunch.
It's a great pack there with Kevin Bartlett, John Davison, Don Breidenbach and Graham McRae, a real international bunch of cars. We've got a New Zealander, American, an Australian, and another Australian, all in that pack. And John Davison slipping back a position there as Don Breidenbach slipped down inside him under brakes. A good move by the American Breidenbach. Nobody knew much about him when he came here, and he said in a modest sort of a way that we wouldn't have come here if we didn't think we could win the series on consistency and win at least one race. This is Breidenbach, who's had two minor accidents in the series. That's Chris Milton going unaccustomedly well. John Goss behind him in the blue car, number 2. This is Bartlett, followed now by Breidenbach, who's moved up in front of John Davison, son of the famous Victorian. And in fact, it's Graham McRae there. So Davison has moved out of that bunch. Graham McRae, and McRae is having a crack at Breidenbach as they go up the straight. Breidenbach, though, wants to go past Bartlett.
I think Breidenbach is testing Bartlett out, and I think in the next couple of laps we'll see him trying to have a go, and it looks as though the end of the main straight is where he's going to have a shot at it.
It's the main spots for overtaking. This little Pt1 Brabham, a fairly unique car in the racing world, was just imported by Bartlett for the series, much lighter than the car number 5 of Don Breidenbach, who's slow out of that section there, very slow indeed. He said this morning he felt he hadn't quite come to grips with certain parts of the circuit, and he is noticeably slower than some of the other competitors through certain sections. But McRae has a very light car, as also has Kevin Bartlett. McRae's is in fact the lightest car in the series, bar that of John McCormack's.
It looks as though Bartlett was aware that Breidenbach was going to have a go, and as they came to the end of the main straight, all three pulled over to the middle to make sure there was no way through.
Yes, they're tending to cover that loophole down the inside there. It would be tending to slow Kevin Bartlett a bit. Acknowledges the flag there, showing him that somebody's following closely. And the old soldier of Australian racing, Kevin Bartlett, twice Australian champion driver, back in 1968 and 1969. He's very quick through the tight stuff. Kevin really does know how to charge, but has been handicapped for many years through sometimes poor machinery, old and worn-out machinery, and lack of money, and not being able to go as hard as he would like. But this is a great dice.
The third car in that group, the leading group there, is Graham McRae in a GM car, one of his own design and manufacture. And I think he is trying just as hard to get past Breidenbach as Breidenbach is trying to get past Bartlett, number 3.
This is the dice for 6th, 7th and 8th place. Kevin Bartlett in 6th. Breidenbach behind him is in 7th, McRae in 8th, and behind him it's Milton in 9, Ross in 10 and Gary Cooper in 11th. Look at McRae! Oh, it's very hard to get round the back there, but McRae's having a real go. The New Zealander who's won 3 of these International Formula 5000 series,
yes,
who's been very much out of racing for 2 years, but who was challenging Brown strongly last week for the lead, is having a crack up the straight. He's down on the inside of Breidenbach. He will get past him, I think, under brakes. He's got him boxed in, and they'll go deeply under brakes at 280 kilometres an hour. McRae inside Breidenbach.
No, didn't make it. Didn't make it.
And Bartlett, in the meantime, would have a quick look in the mirrors to see what's going on behind, and he knows just how much pressure is on him. In the meantime, the situation at the front is quite unchanged, with Brown leading from Johnny Walker. Vern Schuppen has now incidentally got past Bruce Allison. Schuppen up to 3rd. Costanzo's not far behind Allison, so he's in 5th place. And then, of course, we have the dice that we've been looking at. That is with Bartlett and McRae and Breidenbach. So Bartlett, Breidenbach, McRae putting on a great dice, a great demonstration of dicing, and it's been a very strong wind that drivers were going into this straight yesterday, but it has fallen considerably today, but still is a headwind as the drivers go up the main straight.
Yes, yesterday's wind was so strong that they had different characteristics going up the main straight into the wind and coming down the other side of the wind behind them.
We saw there Warwick Brown coming past to complete 17 laps in a 50-lap race, and this Adelaide International Raceway 2.41 kilometres around. Brown out now on his 18th lap. Behind him, Johnny Walker still hanging on well to 2nd position. That's Walker in the white car. Further back, Schuppen has moved to 3rd. That's Schuppen at the back of the picture there. And in 4th place is Allison. Number of lap cars in. That's Johnny Walker in 2nd place. South Australian going remarkably well. A sandpiper at Sandown, where uncompetitive engines left him right out of the running, but he said, if I spend the money on an engine, I can get into the prize money, and it's an investment worth making. He's made the investment. He's got an engine from Count Rudy van der Straat, the Belgian BDS team that support Warwick Brown, and today he's going like a flyer. That's the race situation at the moment. A very good race it is too.